Hello, EMBL. Welcome to everyone who's joining us for the first time. This is already the 17th Coffee with EMBL, and to all of you who have been at some of the previous 16 events, welcome back. It's great to see you again. For all our newcomers, this has really been one of the silver linings for me from the pandemic. This was a forum that was started in response to the original lockdown and the start of the pandemic in 2020. And we discovered this great forum for bringing our community together, linking people really from all around the world through our common interest in science and society, and the fact that we are either alumni or current staff members at the EMBL organization. And so this brings people together. We've had thousands of people over the last year and a half taking part in these events. Today already, we've had almost 200 people again, maybe 200 people registered from 29 countries, including not only all the main countries in Europe, but also the USA, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, India, and many others. So this is a fantastic opportunity to exchange ideas, to learn from each other, and to explore some of the most interesting and important events relevant to society today. So the current series of Coffee with EMBL are exploring the theme of artificial intelligence and discussing how this will affect society. So in our last Coffee with EMBL, we started the discussion on artificial intelligence by, I think, a really fascinating review and insight into the breakthrough event that emerged this summer when AlphaFold announced that their deep learning algorithms for predicting three-dimensional protein structures, and this was also incorporated by the EBI into this remarkable new database that has increased the number of structures available to the benefit of us all. And so that was the main focus of our discussion a month ago. And at the end of the session, we were asking the guests what they thought the next big frontier where we were going to see society transformed by artificial intelligence. And we were really struck by Janet Thornton in particular, stressing that she saw healthcare as being the next area where we were going to see, not just for research, but for society in general, being transformed by AI. So we've invited as one of our guests today, Søren Brunak, who is one of the world leaders in applying AI to healthcare, especially taking advantage of the near unique situation in Denmark for access to healthcare records. By the way, there is also a live stream option on the top of your screen for anyone who would like to take advantage of a simultaneous transcript appearing of the discussion as it unfolds. If anyone has accessibility issues or would like to take advantage of that, or just can't understand my Scottish accent, you could perhaps get I don't know how well it will predict what I'm saying, but you can read that using the live stream option. But Søren, if I may introduce you to start the discussion, can you please share with us your thoughts about the impact of AI and how it can transform healthcare?
Yes, I will do that. And first of all, thank you for the invitation to this super initiative and this event. So I've been working in the machine learning area since the mid 80s. So I've been sort of following the area for quite a long time, also from the time where we didn't have much data. And the situation today is, of course, very different. But if I should answer your question, I would say that the reason why AI will change healthcare are first and foremost that there is a great unmet need for the types of solutions that these decision support algorithms and other types of data analysis can provide to healthcare. I mean, precision medicine, we talk a lot about that, to individualize treatment, but it doesn't happen by itself. And it is easier to use a one-size-fits-all model when you give prescriptions to people and when you choose treatment and so on. And healthcare is really needing much more advanced methods that can take all the different data modalities that we see in healthcare today into account. And machine learning is really, and AI is really excellent for integrating these different data types and making sort of a cocktail out of them that then can be used for treating decision support, for example. So that's one thing, the unmet need around precision medicine. But then there's also another problem, namely that healthcare is not really sustainable in the current model. And one reason is that the populations get older and older, at least in the Western world. So we have all these multimorbidities where we have diseases in a single person on top of each other. And unless we find some way of handling all these disease co-occurrences and the polypharmacy when you make drug cocktails and all that in a better way, I mean, we will really end in a very problematic situation in 10, 20 years' time when people get even older. So I would say the unmet need is really what will make AI change the situation in healthcare, because the methodology, and you mentioned AlphaFold, I mean, it's really powerful and it's very agnostic in relation to application domain, and we have the data. So the paper is more or less out in at least some countries. Like Denmark, that started the digitization very, very early. But eventually this will happen in all countries because it's too expensive to deal with the paper. So the data are there, the methods are there, and there's a great unmet need. That's my sort of summary of a response to your question.
I think you've raised a whole bunch of topics that we can unpack and explore. One thing that occurs to me straight away is, do you think this will have its main impact by making things that happen today anyway, but just happen more efficiently? Or will it actually open up the opportunity for novelty and new therapies or different ways of delivering healthcare that don't exist? So is it really going to transform the efficiency of the existing services, or is it going to provide new services, or both?
Yeah, I would say it's mainly the latter, namely that it's new possibilities in healthcare. It's actually quite dangerous to suggest that new methodology will make healthcare cheaper, because the experience is that whenever people point at a new patient record system or a new type of apparatus or whatever, even whole genome sequencing in healthcare and so on, it's not making healthcare cheaper per se, unless it's really something where you can see the reduction in cost immediately. So I think it will happen also to some extent. But I think it's the possibilities for discriminating between ischemic heart disease patients in a completely new way, where you can offer them a much more differential treatment and treating people with many diseases on top of each other in a new way that we are not having the possibility of doing today. So I'm not sure that the efficiency aspect is the main driver. People might say so, but I'm not sure it's that aspect that will be the most important, because we will just increase the level of ambition in healthcare, and in that way.
So do you think in future, instead of going to see a human doctor or speaking on the telephone to a human doctor, we'll call a number and we'll actually have a dialogue with a machine driven by AI who will deal with our diagnosis the same way that today they book our air flights and hotel rooms?
I think in certain areas, but I think we are doing that already today in some sense without AI, because we're just Googling to find answers. So we are not even asking a semi-intelligent algorithm to find answers. We're just Googling known knowledge, and we try to find out what's up and down, or whether these symptoms could be related to this disease. So I'm not sure that this sort of automatic, and I'm also very, very afraid of the word automatic, because I mean there's always somebody behind something that is automatic. So I'm not sure that for many of these advanced questions, complicated questions. Remember also that patients ask questions in ways that is not sort of the language that is spoken with among physicians and internally, and so I think that there's a lot of difficulty in that. So and I think it's not a major goal to have an automatic doctor. And we've also seen, for example, with the Watson system, for example, that you claim that you have something that can make automatic suggestions of whatever, and in country after country, some of these systems were actually stopped again, because it is the decision support on the shorter time scale. I think this is where we will see the benefits.
Well, I guess that raises the issue about just how far AI can go and how much more it can develop. But before we come to that, I know that Alvis is keen to talk about that topic, but I think Thomas has raised a really critical point that will be on the minds of many people. Thomas, do you want to raise this issue?
Yes. Hi, everybody. So, I mean, the question about that was that if I think of the scientific data, somehow we have some level of standardization, and a lot of stuff, unless it's under patent, I guess, is somewhat public domain. But for medical data, I think there are, even more challenges, because the data are somewhat kept in records that are in the different institutions and hospitals. And of course, there's a huge issue of privacy of those data. So what can you tell us about what is happening in that field? And is that, a unresolved question so far?
Yeah, I think this is a super important aspect, and we of course often blame GDPR, for example, in Europe for making all this impossible. I've even heard Francis Collins in a talk in Washington, I think more than a year ago, saying that the US couldn't collaborate with Europe anymore because of GDPR. But I think my prediction is that the new technologies that are more safe, secure private cloud technologies, cloud bursting, where you can integrate data in new ways. There are many new technologies that can actually make this happen and happen in a safe way. So I think it's also a discussion that is influenced by the payment model in a country. I guess in the countries where you have a one-payer system, where the data cannot really be used against you. I mean, if somebody knows something about my health in Denmark, it's hard really to use it against me financially in relation to my treatment, because it's not a fully insurance-based system, and I think it's the lawmakers who should take care of that problem to protect us against having our health data used against us. And there are, of course, also a lot of laws doing that. But I think it's the technology that will make it possible to actually work with these data in a safe way. And of course, in some countries there have been leaks, but it's not something that is happening at the scale that corresponds to how we talk about it. But it's good that we talk about it, because then that systems are being safer and safer.
So this is another really good point, of course, that we are having this discussion today as a global community. There are people from 4 or 5 continents taking part, discussing. I wonder if we could bring in Chris Sander again, who's not only an expert in AI, but who is currently living and working in the US, but obviously has spent a large part of his career also working in Europe. Chris, what's your view? Should we, in our societies, be scared of AI? Should we be scared of data collection and it being used against us to deny us healthcare, or will it transform our future for the better?
So I think it will transform our future for the better, but the risks are that we have to control the information. And of course, there's been huge discussion about that, and we've seen what happened with not just Brexit, but also the last election in the US, where data that is influenced through interesting channels can have an effect in the world that isn't necessarily positive, depending on your political views. So I think the control of data is very important. The including the ownership of data. At one point, I attended a meeting in Heidelberg, actually, where we tried to discuss the ownership of human genome information. And I was trying to push the point of view that there should be a constitutional right to own your own genome information. And then you can sell it, make it available. And there was lots of pushback from that, from the legal. But anyway, the main point is, I think that including all the data that we have now, our location data that's used by large companies, and we don't own it, we don't control it. I think that's a major risk, and we should work hard to actually control the data. Let me give you an example of a possible application related to what Søren was talking about. That, by the way, I mean, we had a fantastic opportunity to collaborate with Søren on the Danish data set, looking at clinical health records to assess the early risk of cancer. This is work in progress. And for me, just the most amazing collaboration becomes possible by the international connections and the organization of the Danish healthcare system and Søren's leadership in that. So that's an example of where collection of data becomes really important. What we found out in that context is that it's one thing to have the computational methods from AI. They're using machine learning and so on, natural language processing, fantastic. It's not that hard to actually master that once you learn it and devote yourself to it. A key aspect that's maybe more than 50% of the success of AI in healthcare is access to the data. And so having access in the way that Søren and his colleagues have in Denmark was a major thing. And that's a major barrier. Now, how do you get access to data, own it, and then how do you get more data for healthcare? Let me give an example of there's lots of work going on to actually not just detect the risk of cancer from healthcare records, but some of the speculation to collect data, on your smartphone, which is a supercomputer, or from your not to advertise a device, but some device that measures your heartbeat and your oxygen and so on. There's much more to come, as you know. and have heard, which is sensors in the body, maybe some micro devices that actually measure things in the body and report it out, not just when people are sick, but as they live, to report what is the state of what's happening in the body. There's a major opportunity there. Technology with AI can make predictions and take preventive action to help prevent disease, not just cure it. And I agree with Søren that it won't necessarily bring down the cost of healthcare. Costs will shift, but there may be substantial benefit of new data collection technologies in the body and AI to actually catch disease early in the way that Søren and I are trying to do in cancer, but across the board. Aging of the immune system, very important aspect in terms of cancer and other aspects of human health. And I think these are opportunities that are going to happen. We have pacemakers in bodies, right? So having devices in bodies is not so surprising. We have all these machines to collect data and to communicate. So that, I'm taking a very positive, optimistic view, is going to actually have a major impact of the next 10, 20, 30 years. But we have to, be experts in how to use it, to develop the technology, both experimental, and we have to control the data much better, including ownership or privacy, whatever the legal framework is.
Chris, in many ways, I share your enthusiasm and that of Søren, and I suspect most, if not all, of the people here. I can still see challenges in selling, not literally, but convincing our colleagues. When we live in democracies, for those of us who live in democratic societies, where our fellow citizens who today are saying, I don't want the coronavirus vaccine because I think Bill Gates is trying to put a microchip in my head or some other crazy thing, and they have the same vote that you do in deciding elections. We were discussing about some of the problems with the quality of political leadership in many of our countries. I can see, first of all, a huge amount of suspicion amongst the broader population who are not scientifically at the forefront of understanding these issues, just deep suspicion that will push against the idea of the data. I think that's one obstacle. And another thing I have heard is the advances you are promising us or foreseeing, and your enthusiasm is built on. I think there are elements of our society today who say that's all stuff that applies to the rich, middle class, white people, and it's not my community who benefits because we can't afford it as it moves into. So how are we going to both implement the potential of AI to do good and convince our fellow citizens and make it available in a broad, diversified way so that all our communities benefit from it? Or do you not think that's a challenge?
I'll make a brief comment, and of course, I'd love to hear what other people have to say. But my optimistic view also says that phenomena like the anti-vax movement or I guess in Germany they're called Querdenker, and then I think even if I may reveal my political view, even people like Donald Trump or Viktor Orban, they will be transient in history unless humanity collapses. I think these are things go up and down. We know all kinds of bad history that got repaired in Europe in particular in the middle of the last century. And so I think that these are going to go up and down. They're going to go back. People, in terms of their rights that are against vaccines, they stop at a red light. And they don't think that limits their freedom. And so I think that will be gradually go into society and be accepted, especially as technology develops. But the other issue, which is completely unsolved, and there I agree with you, is to even that out in the world between the rapidly rising population and countries which are less well off in terms of, and less well off in a general sense. And unless we address that imbalance, there are going to be real problems in the world. There, I'm less optimistic, but I do think as scientists, we have a social responsibility to speak up beyond the papers we are writing, beyond the career and getting promoted to full professor. Yes, it's great to be there, but I think we have an obligation to speak up in the world about these unsolved problems.
I would also like to add another angle, a little bit more practical angle on this, because we can talk about this in very philosophical terms. But if we look at health access to healthcare data today, then we have a very, very restricted situation in Europe. We just had the global board of the company Roche visiting Denmark. They select one country every year, and then they come 20 people, and then they look into the setup in a country. And this year they had selected Denmark and had a lot of focus on health data. So the CEO there, he said repeatedly that Roche is putting 90% of their investment in health data related stuff into the US. I mean, the health data in Europe is far better, he said, and I would agree. But still, they put their investment into the US because the data are accessible, because you just pay for it. And we have to think about the consequences, because we are getting algorithms into Europe that have been trained on data from the US, from a different healthcare system that often maybe will not lead to the best possible decision support for us. Why are we not using our own data to make and actually put all our data into a hat, and then we actually share our data so that we can have algorithms actually helping the doctors giving us better treatment? No, we actually buy data. If we are in pharma, we buy data in the US, and then we use it to develop treatments. And his perspective was that now Europe has in many ways lost the entire tech algorithm development with Google and all these companies that drives that agenda. Now Europe is close to losing the same thing in the healthcare domain, simply because of hindrances in terms of making the data available to researchers who can develop new methods, but also to companies who of course need to be involved, because otherwise we will not have new precision medicine drugs. I mean, they are not made in the public domain to a large extent. I mean, that's the division of labor we have with big pharma and small pharma and biotech. That is, a lot of this goes on there. So I'd just like to bring that aspect in the US. You can just pay your way into the data. In Europe, the data are just sitting there, except in a few countries, and you can make old-fashioned epidemiology in the data, because you're not looking at the whole population. You're not using big data approaches, because there are legal obstacles to that. And we shouldn't just leave this. I mean, many very nice things are going on in the US in this domain. But in Europe and elsewhere, we should not just leave it to others to develop the tools that actually should be used in our healthcare.
Yeah, I mean, we've already uncovered so many amazingly important things to discuss, and number of dimensions of this discussion. I see this also as a great opportunity for our community, include this EMBL community, to contribute. And I personally feel it's very important that we democratize the benefits of AI into healthcare and other aspects of life, both within all our societies. And it's not a case for people in Europe. And even although the UK Brexited, Chris, I still feel I'm part of Europe. I'm going to keep feeling that. So apologies about that. I still feel very guilty and wounded when I hear about it. But yeah, I'm still speaking as a European. And so I think it's really important that it's not just a case of looking at other societies, whether it's North America or somewhere else, and pointing out benefits of socialized medicine or other systems. I think it's really important we recognize barriers and limitations and try to democratize the benefits and really actively push this forward. And I think that one of the things that's important to reduce the fear of new things, which is common in human societies, is that we can contribute by educating people and providing reliable, unbiased knowledge that's free of political bias from our community. And that's one of the missions, just to advertise one of the initiatives that we, Thomas and I and other members of the community are working hard to set up, for example, social media and YouTube channels to take forward what we're doing here and communicate as broadly as possible unbiased scientific information to help towards that goal. There are so many important points that we're just discussing. And Thomas also, I think, has another really good point. Who's responsible when we use AI to take away decision-making from humans in the healthcare realm? Who then becomes responsible or culpable when a mistake is made? Because you can't go from a situation where there's no AI to perfect AI. We see this in self-driving cars. We see this in other applications of AI. In healthcare, if you have an AI pathologist who will look at your X-ray and diagnose whether you need one therapy or another therapy, and they make a mistake, who gets sued? What's the... Thomas, would you have a better way of describing that question?
I think Angus, you made it clear. I mean, but who do we sue? And also, I think if we go beyond that, what do we do? Because if then it comes out that the algorithm or the deep learning thought process is faulty, I mean, how do we rectify it? That is also quite a question. I mean, can we, put the algorithm metaphorically in jail not to make a mistake again? I mean, what is the legislation saying and what are the scenarios there?
I mean, it's important also to pay attention to, for example, some of these initiatives EU has taken to make a regulation that actually puts different algorithms into categories according to how dangerous they are to use. Whether the machine will pull the oxygen itself, or it's a warning that might lead to an action from a human. So I think that's a good thing. We make algorithms and they should be annotated and put in categories according to how dangerous they are. We also seen algorithms in aircraft that are not necessarily super well implemented because the staff had not been trained to overrule them in situations where they try to overrule them. All this needs to be managed, but we should also not just. I mean, this question, Angus, whom to sue? I think it's not a good question. That's an American question. It's not. Now I'm not campaigning against the U.S., but I mean this question of whom you want to sue. I mean that's something that the U.S. healthcare system spends an enormous amount of money on and costs on, and it's not. I think the key question. The key question is how do we make algorithms and decision support safer, and how do we regulate it? I mean, you can also show humans for mistakes they make, and I think it's not the right question, because we will have mistakes made in healthcare. They are made on a daily basis. I recently published together with my postdoc a paper on misdiagnosis, because we felt that we had actually a method that could find wrong diagnosis in COPD that rather should have been lung cancer that then was untreated. So, I mean, mistakes happen, but I think the question is not that we should the system unsuable or that. I think it's not the right agenda.
I mean, that was partly a tongue-in-cheek way of describing, I think, a genuine issue of where does responsibility lie? Because as we persuade our fellow citizens to adopt these methods, responsibility is something, and legal systems need time to catch up. I see that Jennifer has her hand up. I wonder if perhaps she would like to contribute before we move on. Jennifer? Peter, can you unmute Jennifer?
Hi there. Yeah, I was just going to say the same as you were saying there, that it's more a case of responsibility, who takes responsibility rather than legally, but it's a case of if things go wrong, who's there to help the person who has had a problem. It's not simply a case of suing, it's responsibility. And ultimately, you could look at it as working with a piece of equipment that a doctor uses. If an electrocardiogram gives something wrong, if something piece of equipment fails, again, who takes responsibility? And of course, it would be the one here. It would be like the NHS if it's provided by them, or who runs the private clinic. So, I mean, there's always, in effect, a human in charge. But I think I was just really making that point. It's more the responsibility than the legal. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, absolutely. That is absolutely the point. I can see a parallel also, at least I kind of welcome comments on this, with the parallel activity that's going on to change our society by using AI to develop autonomous vehicles. I think this could absolutely transform our societies in a very short time frame, taking away jobs from many people, especially those without university or college degrees who make their living by driving taxis, lorries, Lastwagen, whatever, other vehicles, and this will become automated. I heard a very interesting discussion about this, where it was commented by the CEO of one of the leading car companies who are developing this technology, and he pointed out that in the US, currently, approximately 35,000 people die every year from car accidents, and many more are injured. Almost all caused by human failings, by people driving while they're using their phone, drunk, taking drugs, occasionally with medical heart attack, but mostly human incompetence or breaking the law. And even if you introduce self-driving technology that is 10 times safer than humans doing it themselves, you don't go from 35,000 deaths to zero. Tenfold improvement goes from 35,000 deaths to 3,000 to 4,000 deaths. And this CEO pointed out that the 30,000 people whose lives were just saved don't know their life was saved. And the 3,000 who still die because of the robot car will sue your ass off. So you can have a situation where the legislators block something because they say, here's a risk, 3,000 people are going to die. And what I'm really saying is, what that argument really highlights to me is the problem in society of a lack of education and understanding of data-driven arguments. And that's another way where I think it's important for us to contribute. But I'd like to bring in Alvis from the EBI, because I know, Alvis, you're clearly at the EBI have been heavily involved in leveraging the advantages for the research community of this AlphaFold and its benefits. I'm sure you're thinking about other ways you can take advantage. But Alvis, what do you see as the limits of AI for changing our society? Is everything going to be possible, or do you think it really has severe limits?
No, I was listening to Søren's cautious answer in the first part of the question about whether when we call up the doctor, we'll have an AI on the other side. And I got kind of wondering whether it's a bit of a politician in Søren who was so cautious about this. Yeah. But then of course, Søren qualified this as a short term. And I guess the question is, how long is it short term? But I personally think that the AI will not only be on the other side end of the phone at some point, giving the best possible answers, but the AI also will figure better answers than the humans know, and better therapies than the humans know eventually. The question, of course, is how long it will take. And I think that humans have been, all of us have been constantly underestimating what the AI can do. I joined EMBL in 97, which was the year when the Deep Blue beat Garry Kasparov, who was the world chess champion at the time. And it was just a few days before it happened, and then people, the people in the chess community, it could never happen. Before that, they said chess, the computer will never play like a grandmaster, and then that happened, and well, okay, but the world champion is a different level, yeah. And then it happened, and for a while there was discussion that, well, it was not entirely fair. They changed something in the middle, which was true, actually, yeah. But it all kind of, and then they said, well, it's just exhaustive search, yeah. So, of course, computer can do better exhaustive search, yeah. But then, of course, and then later when the deep mind and AlphaGo beat the Go, the first European champion in 2015, I think, and a year later the world champion, then it all kind of went away. And now we see, it was not that long ago, I know Janet, yeah, who was speaking last time, 5, maybe 10 years ago, people were asking her, why don't you do protein structure prediction? And her answer was, it's impossible. Yeah, there's no way to do it. Yeah. So we are constantly underestimating actually what can happen. And we are now still all saying that, well, there are certain things that only human can do. This reminds me of vitalism, which was live and kicking less than 100 years ago, the first half of the last century. Many scientists believe that there are some special vital forces behind life. And it took quite some time before that went away. When we were talking, Angus, last time, you brought up digital photography, yeah, how that it also kind of came around the same time at end of 90s. And initially photographers were saying, no way, film is so much better. Nobody, I don't think anybody is saying anymore. And the reason is that once we have enough capacity in case of digital photography, simply enough memory, we can have the pixels are on the regular grid. In the film, they are kind of randomly scattered. But if our capacity, if we have enough pixels of that in the random grid, we can simulate what the film looks like if we want to, really, yeah. And I think that will happen at some point. Human brain doesn't have vital forces, yeah. I don't see the reason why computer eventually will not be simulating each of us.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting thing. I'd be very keen if people would put in the chat their own thoughts about what they see as the limitations in our lifetime or your lifetime. And many of you will have longer lifetimes than me, of what AI will be capable of doing. And because we should remember that for most of recorded civilization, humans, the greatest thinkers believed that living things were made of different substances than non-living things. And it was really a couple of fantastic German chemists, notably Friedrich Wöhler and then Hermann Kolbe in the first half of the 19th century, who destroyed that theory by actually proving you could synthesize from inorganic material identical molecules to those isolated from living things. In the case of Wöhler, everyone's heard of Einstein or Darwin. Not everyone's heard of Wöhler, but he actually showed that you could synthesize urea, which I always thought was one of the rare examples of someone who changed the world by actually taking the piss. But he, if you'll forgive that analogy, but he absolutely, in combination, there were several people at the same time, but they demonstrated scientifically that actually living material is made of the same stuff, the same molecules as non-living. And yet there's a sort of conceit, I think, amongst humans that our brains, at least, our thought processes are still somehow different from what machines can do. I see some sort of parallel between our present conceit as humans that however efficient machines get, it's not the same as the thought processes that go on in our meat computers in our head. And that we somehow are fundamentally different. But I think we have to be cautious if we take the example of how from Aristotle all the way through Galen and all the great thinkers up until these German chemists destroyed that thing, that we're made of some different vital material. Maybe the computer algorithms will, maybe Chris and Søren here will next year or deliver something that thinks, well, maybe they already have, that thinks more better than I can, or that there's really no difference. It's actually just an implementation of exactly the same phenomenon. So I'd be really interested to know if anyone else thinks the same thing, because if you're correct, Alvis, in saying this, then actually coming back to Søren's first point, you will be phoning up instead of a physician, a machine, because it will be able to understand your Danish accent, your colloquial speech. It will understand everything so much better, and potentially it like an autonomous driver, it won't take drugs, it won't check its mobile phone, it won't get bored or sleepy, and it will, however well it performs, it will be consistent. So that's a really interesting point. I mean, Uwe, who I think is here, I mean, do you think this can transform our society? Can it transform the pharmaceutical industry? Am I talking nonsense? Yeah.
Well, I think it's very hard to say where the limitations is. I don't dare to say so. I think it's very open, but I think it will transform biological research and also healthcare, pharmaceutical research. Because, we had this great discussion about AlphaFold. I think even though it's very narrow area of structural biology, one can see already that this, extends now, can solve more crystal structures by doing molecular replacement. There's a company in Austria I just came across, they're using AI to predict protein-protein interactions, and they also plan to make use of these results, from AlphaFold. So it's like a self-nurturing field, where many, many holes in our knowledge are closed, and we will learn more and more. It's also generating more data. I mean, Thomas just put this in the chat that still experimental science is needed, and absolutely, there are novel techniques, novel data types, and of course, these data first need to be generated. They don't fall out of the sky. And I've been working on the deep learning approach to predict potency of siRNAs many years back. And we had to generate data ourselves, into that. What's better now is there's many, many more data out there. That some of it is even accessible. And I found this discussion very interesting about the accessibility, especially of healthcare data, because even, I just wanted to add that it's a different direction now, but goes back to our first point. In Novartis, I was working 15 years in Novartis, and we planned at some point to define unified data standards for microarray expression data, because there were many, many little islands of databases, Excel sheets where people kept their data. And then we wanted to do this not only for research and development, but for across all, the units. And this was a nightmare, because then all these patient regulations and laws and so came in. So it took years, to define these audit trails and access rights, because not everybody was allowed to see all the data just by legal requirements. This was not possible. Of course, technically, it's possible to say, okay, put this all in a database, but then you really get in trouble. So everybody who wanted access to all the data needed to do a course and sign a form, and it was very, very complicated. I think Søren also, and you guys all know that, it's not that easy. And but what struck me was this is a organization, just one pharmaceutical company. It's not the country or the whole world, and even there, it was really, really difficult to solve this, right? And it was surprising to me because I'm not a lawyer, I don't all the. So there is a clear limitation, but that's not a limitation in AI. It's more limitation accessibility to the data. Yeah, that's what I would see.
I think we maybe should not just look at this in terms of replicating humans. I mean, that's sort of like when you have artificial teeth, for example, you just want to mimic something we have already. I mean, AI in healthcare will be able to do much more than the physicians can do today. And I think that's the perspective. And one of the technologies that now is really booming, and we also use that in the collaboration with Chris, is the explainability techniques, where we try to find out what features are the algorithm actually using to make its prediction. And there we now learn a lot of new things that the clinicians were not aware of. And that will really, in the end, benefit healthcare and benefit the patients. I mean, we just completed an algorithm that tried to predict unplanned cesareans based on previous disease history and that sort of thing. And some of the features we came up with, people in obstetrics had never thought of them as potential factors that would be involved. Right. And it still needs to be verified and validated. But we should look at AI also in this way, that it's not just artificial teeth. It is a technology that actually can make us wiser and do completely new things that humans cannot do. And then together with humans, it becomes super interesting. It's not so much, for me at least, this discussion about whether humans will be replaced. It's more sure. A collaboration with the algorithm, and I think that's a good partnership. And we shouldn't be scared in this way, in my opinion. But yeah,
and so we have to
have different views,
and we have to communicate that. So very conscious of the time. I'm going to let Chris come in just 1 second. Who's got his hand up? Peter has also prepared a poll so we can vote, because we're really interested to hear after this discussion what people think. And we have a question about whether you believe AI is going to transform our society in a way that compares with how industrialization completely changed our society 200 years ago. But just before Peter invites you to do that and opens the poll, Chris, would you like to come in?
Just very briefly, two brief comments. One of them is, I have no doubt, given the last 10, 15 minutes, that there will be tremendous progress in data collected in the human body, AI in healthcare, making a major impact in the way that Søren just hinted at. No doubt that there's going to be major progress. However, I think there's another topic that's related, and maybe this is teeing up for another EMBL coffee discussion that we haven't touched, which is there's going to be a major impact, not through self-driving cars, et cetera, changing the workforce, but the fact that humanity evolves also collectively as human culture, a collective brain. And something is happening, it's been happening for the last 20 years. Whenever Google first arose with their targeted advertising, the engines that collect human information, the large companies, they're actually programming human behavior. And we talked about the politics a bit, but in terms of purchasing behavior and so on, it's so obvious. And that's where all that money, quote unquote, is coming from. That hasn't even reached its full potential. So I think we have to grapple with the fact that there are going to be centers, information collection beyond what we see today, AI that analyzes how human behavior can be programmed, not one by one, but on average. So the program isn't 100% efficient like a computer program, but there's a probability that human behavior gets influenced by all the things we see, and we see more and more stuff coming in. That, I think, is a potential of AI that's going to play out, and whether it plays out positively or negatively, programming human behavior is a major political issue, not just a technical issue. And we as scientists should pay attention to that and educate the next generation to fix that problem in a positive way.
I totally agree with you, Chris, and we are very keen on signing you up to help us with communicating via our social media YouTube initiative. So let's take this vote, and then there's a number of issues coming. I mean, I see several points in the chat that I think are really relevant. The polls on the screen, so please vote. And we'll record what the feelings of this group is. I think the issue of ethics is also something. And Søren, if you still have a couple of minutes before you need, I know you have to get to the airport. It's really kind of you to join today, even in transit, as it were. But I wonder if perhaps while people are voting, you could just start this discussion about what initiatives have been taken, at least in the European domain, to take science forward in the AI realm in combination with an ethical overview of what's considered acceptable.
I do not have a complete overview of what is going on. I'm for example, in an EU project called EU stands for PM, for personalized medicine, and in that project the idea is to develop standards, for example, for explainability of AI algorithms in healthcare. And I mean, for example, we have many Germans in this project, and Germans are obsessed by standards. It was interesting to join that project because I learned a lot about how these standards come about. And of course, in bioinformatics, we know about standards for microarray data, and Alvis has been a pioneer with that. But I think it's that kind of effort that is needed in order to say what do we want as citizens in relation to, for example, an AI algorithm. What are the good manufacturing practices around explainability in AI algorithms in healthcare? So I think it's initiatives like that will help, like they have helped in bioinformatics to actually annotate the data with metadata in a way where you actually could see in a standardized way what the experiment was about. It's some of it is maybe a little bit boring, but I think it's necessary to develop these ontologies and these standards to find out where we are, and also, of course, important in relation to approval of algorithms. But we should also remember that many of the algorithms that are used in healthcare today, very, very simple formula that just take 5 features and predict whether you are likely to get a heart attack within 5 years. Simple linear algorithms. And they are used today. They are also being used by clinicians to inform their decisions. So I'm looking at this in a very pragmatic way. Can we improve that rather than the philosophical question of whether the algorithm will replace the humans? And I think standards is also a way to improve that on the transparency in this domain. This is what Chris also talked about. Can we follow what is going on here? And I don't like this black box expression for AI, because we have looked at the weights in neural networks and machine learning algorithms for many years. I found, for example, together with my students, in unknown enhancer patterns when we trained neural networks to predict intron splice sites in genes, and we didn't know about what enhancers was, and this pattern was not known, and we got the paper mysteriously accepted in Journal of Molecular Biology. We learned something we didn't know before, and also that the field didn't know. And that was by looking at the weights in a machine learning algorithm in 1992. And now this has been sophisticated tremendously. And I think we will learn a lot of new things about how the human body works and how it reacts to treatment, for example.
Okay. The result of the poll came in where an overwhelming majority, 88% of, almost 80% of people voted, over 80% voted. And of those, almost 90% said, yes, they did think it would transform society. Actually, the most surprising result for me is that apparently 6 people voted no, and it's an anonymous poll. I'm quite interested to know if anyone's willing to share their view. If you voted no because you think it may transform society, but it shouldn't do, you don't want it to do it, or you think it will transform it not like the way it happened in the Industrial Revolution, but much more, which I think may be possible. So maybe our question wasn't precise enough, but if anyone wants to comment on the chat.
Angus, I would suggest that also those who voted yes can answer this question if I disagree.
Yeah. So what's your view, Alvis?
Well, my view is that at some point there will be a question whether humans should be allowed to make decisions which affect AI. And if you don't believe this, I would suggest that you read a book by the Nobel laureate in literature, Ishiguro, a recent book, Clara and the Sun. That's a very thought-provoking book. I could recommend everybody to read it.
Yeah, that's right. I've made a note of that. I'm ordering it from I won't say the name, but a major online book supplier, so I can read this. I think it will transform society in ways that go beyond very quickly that what we understand. And I'm really concerned if we don't think in advance and plan for this. I mean, people at the moment are talking about the effect of climate change and what it may do by the end of the century. I think there will be a more immediate change that will cause social unrest, displace labor from conventional jobs by the impact of automation and changing our society. And I think there are huge fears if we don't educate our colleagues and think how to make use of it. Every technology I've ever seen or heard about, there's nothing good or bad about technology. It's how we choose as humans to use the technology. And I think our job is to find ways of educating our politicians and educating the public to put pressure to use the potential benefits that we can see for AI in a good way. But Thomas, I think you were wanted to.
Yeah, no, I wanted to come back on Chris's point about being, understanding of the forces that are moving also the algorithm and the development. And I mean, we know that, as you pointed out, a lot of the AI development is maximization of profit, right? So I was wondering whether, Alvis was mentioning a book about a robot with feelings and the right of the robot. So, I mean, putting the two things together, I was wondering whether we are to expect some emerging properties from this algorithm at some point, and whether we will need them to actually re-equilibrate a system that might make, humans less in control if we want. And if we think about what Chris said about, people rushing out to buy without even knowing much why they do it, or these kind of issues. So anybody cares to comment on that?
Yeah, please share. And any other thoughts about books or resources, that we would benefit from reading, please put them in the chat so that we can all benefit from them. Open to any input from anyone in the audience. Time's moving on, but now's a good chance to bring it up. I mean, I think one of the concerns I can see, or if not concern, issue that we have to confront is, if we look at it, I mean, we talked about the idea of if AI comes in and automates transport, you don't need the same taxi drivers, or what do all the taxi drivers do? What's going to happen, Søren, to the clinicians if actually pathology is better done in an automated screening format? What happens to the clinical pathologists, the lab technicians? Do we just lose these people? Do they not have these jobs, or do they do something different? Do we have to reinvent the nature of professions that we are used to?
I mean, and I also partly work at a hospital, and I mean, clinicians are very, very dedicated people who wants to do the best for their patients. So they would like to take these tools in if it can help them do their work in a better way. And therefore, they are also, of course, quite conservative, because if the algorithms could be detrimental to what they do, they obviously do not want that. So I think, again, it's a quite pragmatic sort of situation as I see it, because the clinicians, they want the help, because also if you are standing there with a newborn child and it has a problem and you can maybe sequence its genome in 15 hours, I mean, you need the computational interpretation of the data if you should make a difference for that child. And so clinicians are, in my experience, very pragmatic in this way, and also conservative. But it's not about replacing them. It's about doing new things, doing things for people who have diabetes, on top of cancer, on top of kidney disease, on top of some skin diseases, and understanding how these medications, for example, for all these different diseases, how they interact. I mean, there's not much known about all this polypharmacy, for example. We need algorithms to help us understand that. So again, I don't think the agenda is how to outcompete human intervention and the healthcare staff today, because we will just be more ambitious about what healthcare can deliver, and maybe also go more into prevention. We talk about risks a lot, and we are not talking so much about how we can prevent diseases. And I think a lot of focus will also go in that directions, because we will understand more causes for diseases, and that's my view, that clinicians are not getting unemployed anytime soon.
I didn't bring Alvis in just in 1 second before that. some of the things emerging here reminds me of debates and dangers. Some of our audience, I'm sure, are too young to remember this, but when the concept of human genome sequencing first became technologically possible, there was a real danger that certain commercial companies, I don't want to mention the names of some of the people, but many of Chris and you, Søren, and many of us will remember this. And I'd like to credit again some of our former colleagues like John Sulston, who really led the way internationally in keeping the benefits of large-scale genome sequences open access, public domain, to the benefits of all, instead of owned by corporations for their commercial benefit and their shareholders. I think that's one of the dangers here, and I'm starting quite passionate, because I'm quite passionate that we make sure that the benefits of these technologies do remain open access or broad-based for the benefit of all of our societies internationally, not just, Europe versus America, but throughout our individual societies, and also for India and China and Australia and Japan and everywhere else. Do you think we can do that? Alvis, I don't know if that's what you were going to comment on, but maybe you could also comment on that.
I can comment on that too, and particularly going back to the Human Genome Project. Yeah, of course, we have to be vigilant, but I think at least probably you have in mind one particular effort to do it in the commercial domain.
Of course.
They did not, in the end, it speeded up the public project. And the fact that we had 2 genomes rather than 1, I think in the end it played a positive role. Of course, we have to be vigilant, but I think that same is happening with the AI research as well. Even though much of this is going in the commercial domain, the public domain. Well, we see with the AlphaFold, we see this. Yeah. So that it actually has benefited the public domain, and I think it will continue benefiting. I also wanted to kind of briefly your question to Søren and Søren's answer. The fact that the AI beat world chess champion didn't kind of didn't kill chess. It transformed chess, and I think the same is happening. Yeah, in the biomedical domain. But the main point, what I actually wanted to make, is in response to what Thomas said, whether there will be emerging properties. I would say there are already emerging properties with deep learning. Yeah, if you look at AlphaZero, yeah, Angus, you actually explained this to me. I did some research after that. Yeah, it developed its own chess playing style. Yeah, I think it is emerging property. Yeah, of course it probably. I'm not going to guess how many years or decades it will take before the algorithms develop feelings, but I'm pretty sure it will happen. I'm absolutely sure it will happen.
Since you brought up the topic of chess, one of my fond memories of my 8 years in Heidelberg was many games of chess I played against Peter Rice, who I see has got his hand up. Peter, would you like to come in? Can you unmute Peter, please? I think, yeah, there we go. There you go, Peter.
Brilliant. Yeah, I was actually going to out myself as one of those who voted no. But on the subject of chess, chess players are getting on much better with the computer programs these days. So I play correspondence chess, where these days we're all sitting here running Stockfish and Leela, which is really AlphaZero, and a bunch of other analysis engines. And what I like about it is the basic idea is to beat the computer. You know your opponent's using the computer as well, and you use it to predict their moves and then find out where they're going to go wrong. But it does mean an awful lot of correspondence chess games now just end in draws, and it's causing big problems.
Yeah.
On the reason for voting no, in the case of medical data, I don't have very much confidence in the quality of the data. I have personally twice, in consultation with professionals, found mistakes in my medical records. One was a misdiagnosis. One was a trip to the dentist where he recommended surgery on a tooth, and put the surgery recommendation under the wrong patient. The other patient was quite safe. It turns out to be my 4-year-old grandson who doesn't have the tooth in question. So I also worked with some synthetic data for Massachusetts. So you can download 1 million patients synthesized to be characteristic of the residents of Massachusetts. And the data is full of mistakes. Some of the data is corrupted. Half of the males have female names. It's crazy.
But let me comment on that. When we started using machine learning algorithms to predict protein structure, I mean, the structures in PDB, they didn't agree on the secondary structure assignments, right? Then came Chris along with his DSSP algorithm and actually cleaned up the jungle and made the definition of alpha helix or pi helix or whatever the same across all the hydrogen bonds in the structures. And that actually has provided a basis for improving the prediction. And Peter, I think the same will in many ways happen to the health data. We haven't had 20 years to curate the data, to clean up the lab values and all that. And the similar activities are happening everywhere where we clean up the data and we are trying to create the DSSP of health data that was made at EMBL with Kapsch and Sander publishing this similar paper. So noisy data, fine, young doctors, old doctors, and all that, but we will clean it up. And I mean, what bioinformatics has taught us is that we are not afraid of messy data, right? That's our domain. We try to make sense of it, and there AI can help us quite a lot, in my view.
I also
like it has helped the protein structure prediction fields.
I've come across people as well in Boston who've been looking through medical records for COVID and trying to work out whether a patient has been in ICU. It's not in the medical record for some reason, so they've been given some medication that hints they were in ICU.
But Peter, I agree. But WHO released the COVID-19 ICD-10 codes February 1st, 2020. 1 week later, they were implemented in the Danish system. And in some countries, they're still not implemented. As you say, it's very messy. But some countries are ahead of the curve with some of these things and are really reacting fast, getting these new codes for these new diseases into their record system so that the clinicians can use them. And it's just a matter of how advanced the digitization is in different countries. It's not a basic and fundamental hindrance for using these data to improve healthcare. That's my view.
The analogy.
I jump in on this COVID code? So we just published a paper on meta-analysis where we had to map between different countries the codes, really. Yeah, human curator could do it. If the human curator could do it, AI can do it too.
Yeah.
So I unfortunately have to run to my taxi because I'm catching a plane. But this has really been a pleasant discussion, and thanks for inviting me.
Søren, thanks so much for joining us and for sharing your thoughts. We hope we'll see you back in future coffees with EMBL.
So thanks a lot, and thanks.
Take care. We're coming very close to the point where we, in fact, have to wind up the discussion. The good news is that we will carry on a discussion around some of these issues and other ones that have been brought up about the impact of AI. And I really hope that you'll come back, all of you, and join in the discussion. Amongst our guest speakers next time will be Oliver Stegley, who formerly worked at the EBI in near Cambridge and is now in Heidelberg, and Matthias Mann, who also talk about the impact of AI in his field of of proteomics. But perhaps just as one last thought or comment about the issue you raised, Peter, I would just draw an analogy. This is just a repeat of a discussion I had with Alvis recently, but I would just draw the analogy with some other fields where when digital photography or digital image recording was first introduced, and I was one of the stupid people who spent crazy amount of money buying something that wasn't that good because I like technology. And I remember many discussions with other friends who were interested in photography who were saying correctly, at this point in time, the digital cameras were not nearly as good as the traditional film cameras. And that was absolutely correct. But what you could see was a trajectory where it seemed to me easy to predict that in the future, the technology would rapidly evolve to overcome many of the current limitations. And so I think you are correct in pointing to limitations in how healthcare records are recorded that limit some present day applications. But I can't not feel that we see a trajectory looking into the future where ideally that will change in a way that the power of the AI will be improved. But as we all know, with any algorithm, garbage in gives you garbage out. And so we have to find better ways of recording healthcare. I just hope we can do it in a way that doesn't lead to even more of a disadvantaged society with haves and have-nots, and we do this in a way that shares best practice as broadly as possible, and democratizes the benefits of AI. But perhaps that's a topic we can explore in more detail in the next coffee with EMBL also. Time, as usual, has been our enemy. I have really enjoyed today's discussion. I think it's a fantastic community and opportunity to do that. I'd like, on behalf of the whole team putting these meetings together, to thank once again all of our speakers. We thank Søren just before he left, also Uwe, Alvis, and Chris, and to everyone who took part and joined in the discussion, shared their comments. We really hope we'll see you back, and that you also will be interested to help us take forward this mission to spread unbiased, fact-based knowledge about the key issues affecting our society, so that we can help to ensure that we promote the benefits of science research and technology for all of our colleagues more broadly. So thanks to everyone, and great to see you. And I look forward to seeing you at the next coffee with EMBL.